Good evening, good evening. Hope you're all doing well on this wonderful, nice, we're finally getting a little bit of a break of this hot summer weather. No? Okay. We are up to chapter 15, and we've really earned our way to be up to this chapter. Now I want to share with you. Chapter 15 is one of my most favorite chapters of Tanya. So I'm going to share with you that I'm biased while I share this Tanya. While I teach this chapter, I'm biased because this is my favorite here. But I hope that the message is meaningful and resonates with you as well. It's an unbelievable chapter. You know, the Alter Rebbe has long been considered a unbelievable revolutionist, if you could even say that, and an innovator in the area of, number one, Jewish philosophy, Jewish psychology, in the Torah of personal development. And you see that throughout Tanya. Perhaps this chapter, on a personal level, I see it in an unbelievable way. It takes however we look at Judaism and turns it on its head. It's a short and sweet chapter, unbelievable chapter, and the goal is to conclude the entire chapter tonight. And I want to introduce this chapter with two stories, two Hasidic stories. Story number one is like this. There was a chassid of the third Chabad Rebbe. The third Chabad Rebbe, he was known as the Tzemach Tzedek. Like many Jewish greats, he was named after his magnum opus. There's a lot of great sages that we know them by the name of their book. There's a lot of people that study their books and don't even know what their name is. Lots of people like that. So the Tzemach Tzedek is he wrote a series of his books on halachic discourses called the Tzemach Tzedek, but his name was Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of Lubavitch. And of course, we know a more recent Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of Lubavitch, which was his great-great-grandchild. But he lived in the early 1800s. That was his the time when he was, in the early 1800s was when he was the leader of the Chabad movement. The third leader, so he was the Alter Rebbe's grandchild. Once a chassid went over to him, a chassid came to him and said that he wants to ask for a blessing for his grandchild. He just had a grandchild. He asked for a blessing that his newly born grandchild should have a natural inclination to spirituality, to Judaism, and that naturally he should gravitate towards the teachings of Chassidus, and his heart should be warmed and filled with the fear of heaven. That was his blessing. It sounds like a beautiful blessing. You ask that your child, your grandchild should have a natural proclivity to goodness, and the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, was very unimpressed. And he said, it's already been many decades that I and my father-in-law, which was the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, and my grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, have been trying to instill in our followers that Judaism should not be automatic. Judaism shouldn't be casual. Judaism shouldn't be effortless. And here you're asking for a blessing that your grandchild should be able to to have a natural, effortless gravitation to Judaism. He didn't like the blessing. We don't want it to be easy, he says. If you think about it, it's a funny story. What does that mean? What would the Rebbe have against a child which naturally gravitates towards Judaism? It sounds like such a beautiful thing. But here the Rebbe is saying, no, we're fighting against it. We're trying to instill in our Hasidim to have the opposite. That Judaism shouldn't be something that just comes naturally, organically, and you take it for granted. It's something that comes through effort. We have to understand the story. It's a very interesting attitude. One more story. And I believe it happened with the same Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. One of his followers, one of his Hasidim, came to him for an audience and said, Rebbe, I've got a problem. What should I do that it's so difficult for me to study Torah? I know I need to study Torah, but it's so hard for me. You know what the Rebbe told him? He said, and what should I do that I do want to study Torah? You think you've got a problem because you don't want to study Torah? I've got the problem because I do want to study Torah. That's the story. What's the meaning of such a story? The Rebbe says, I've got a problem because I do want to study Torah. These are very deep stories. They reflect a very deep way of thinking through the lenses of Tanya and thinking like a chassid. I want to learn this chapter with you, and then we're going to get back to these stories. Okay? Chapter 15, dear friends. We are learning about a Beinoni, and we are really starting to learn in the previous chapters, practically speaking. How do we start living like a Beinoni? How do we start? What are the first steps of getting ourselves in motion, of thinking like a Beinoni, of doing the first step of a Beinoni? And one of the keys that we've been learning about, in specifically last chapter, is the difference between a tzaddik and a Beinoni. A tzaddik, the fully righteous person, is somebody who does only good, and he is emotionally there as well. His heart, his emotions, his passion is in Judaism, is in serving God. So the tzaddik is fully there in his behaviors and also under the hood, emotionally. The Beinoni, we learned, is very different. The Beinoni is somebody who does possess full behavioral control, that in action, in speech, and in thought, he only does mitzvahs, he stays away from weakness, he never gives in to weakness. But the distinction between the Beinoni and the tzaddik is that the Beinoni, his heart is not always there. His emotions, his passions are not necessarily going to be that interested in doing a mitzvah or studying Torah right now. But he does it anyways. He holds himself to a standard that perhaps he does not naturally feel for. So he knows that he wants to do it, but his heart very often is pushing him, pulling him in the other direction. So that's the Beinoni. The Beinoni is somebody who is not always living in emotional alignment. His heart is not always aligned with the standard he holds himself up to. That's the Beinoni. Now that we understand that, we are ready to go on the next leg of the journey, the next step. So let us begin reading, dear friends. Chapter 15. And the title that I gave it, at least for now, is The Service Makes You a Beinoni. Part 1, are you a noun or a verb? This is unbelievable. Very powerful concept. Are you, as a Beinoni, a noun or a verb? Is your life a noun or a verb? Interesting concept. Let's start reading. Part 1, are you a noun or a verb? Now that we understand the nature of the Beinoni, we can now understand the verse. There's a verse in the book, in the prophets. The prophet Malachi says this verse. Then you shall return to see the difference between a tzaddik and a rasha, between one who serves God and one who does not serve him. Let's take a pause here. Let's look at this verse carefully. The prophet is telling us, return to see the difference, which means one has to understand and know the difference between a tzaddik and a rasha, one who serves God and one who does not serve him. So we have two clauses here. We have the tzaddik versus the rasha. We have the one who serves God versus the one who does not serve him. What's the meaning of this verse? Are these two clauses saying different things, or are they saying the same thing, just in different words? What would you say? Is the one who serves God different than a tzaddik? Is the one who does not serve God different than a Rasha? Or are they the tzaddik and the Rasha? The simple understanding of this verse is that the second clause is simply explaining the first clause. It is saying the same thing in different words. There's a tzaddik versus a Rasha. Or in other words, there's one who serves God versus somebody who does not serve God, which would be the Rasha. But the Alter Rebbe takes this a step further. The Alter Rebbe gives a deeper understanding of the verse. There's a tzaddik and there's a Rasha, and then there is different categories. Somebody who serves God and somebody who does not serve God. So on the simple understanding is that this verse is repetitive. The prophet is saying the same thing twice, just in different words. The Alter Rebbe says no. The second clause is speaking about a Beinoni, and there could be two types of Beinonis. One who serves God and one who does not serve God. Here in this chapter, one of the themes of this chapter is the idea of serving God. In the lifestyle of Hasidus, in the lifestyle of a Chassid, and I don't mean lifestyle like, the superficial stuff, like what type of hat you wear, or what type of jacket you wear. Lifestyle, I mean in the spiritual lifestyle of a chassid. One of the pillars of the lifestyle of a chassid is to serve God. The idea of serving God. In Hebrew, it's called avodas Hashem. You serve God. Now, what does that mean to serve God? We have to live lives of service. That's going to be a big theme over here in this chapter. We have to live lives of service. And there's something called serving God, and there's something called not serving God. And what the Alter Rebbe is going to teach us is that a Beinoni has to be somebody who is serving God. Okay, let's read. The verse is not repeating itself. There is a distinction between one who serves God and a tzaddik. Again, if you look at the verse simply, it seems that a tzaddik is the one who serves God. Alter Rebbe says, no, they're two separate people. A tzaddik is not called one who serves God. Very interesting. Why? Because one who serves is a verb in the present tense, meaning he's in the middle of the job. It's very interesting. There's a verb and there's a noun. There's a very interesting subtlety in the Torah. When the Torah is describing a tzaddik, a righteous person, we don't call him somebody who's serving God. We call him a servant of God. A noun versus a verb. I recently met a doctor. I met a guy and I asked him, what do you do? He said, I'm a surgeon. Ooh, you're a surgeon? So I was asking him a little bit about his line of work. And then he started saying, no. I'm already retired for 20 years. I haven't done a surgery in 20 years, but I'm a surgeon. So it's very interesting. He's a surgeon in noun only. He's not doing surgeries. He isn't. I'm a surgeon. So there's an interesting thing of referring to your status as a verb. This is what I'm doing versus a noun. This is who I am. A tzaddik is not serving God. He is the servant of God. He is beyond that. The Beinoni, we're going to learn, is somebody who is serving God in the present tense. Okay, a little bit confusing. Let's continue reading. We don't refer to a tzaddik as somebody who's serving God. We refer to a tzaddik as the servant of God. He's already there. He's fully made it. Even if he's not doing it, meaning he is doing it. But it's his identity by now. He's earned the right to call that his identity. What is this service? When we speak about serving God, what is the service of serving God? It is the war with the Yetzer Hara. It is the battle that one has to fight against the evil inclination, to overwhelm it and banish it from the small city, from the body, which is referred to as the small city. Why do you have to fight against your Yetzer Hara? so that it will no longer invest itself in the limbs of the body. This is called serving God. Serving God means you show up for battle. Your evil inclination says, let's not do this mitzvah. Your evil inclination says, I'm not interested in studying Torah right now. And you go to battle and say, no, I'm not giving you power and dominion in my body. That's called serving God. You show up for battle. And the Alter Rebbe says, indeed, this incessant battle with the Yetzer Hara is truly a great labor and toil. This is what it means to serve God. To serve God means you show up for life, you don't take it easy, and you fight against your Yetzer Hara. That's the definition of serving God. Now, by the way, in the Hebrew, avodas Hashem, serving God is a little bit too sanitized. It's a little bit too. Serving God doesn't sound like it's such a tough line of work. Avodas Hashem, it means working for God. This is labor. It's hard work. You're not serving God. You're working for God. You got to schwitz a little bit. You're working your head off over here. The fight against the Yetzer Hara. And the Alter Rebbe says, and this, the one who serves God, is the Beinoni. It's a very interesting thing. Let's look at the verse. The prophet is telling us, one has to know the difference between a tzaddik and a rasha, and then there's somebody who serves God. That's not a tzaddik, that's a Beinoni. And then there's somebody who doesn't serve God. We'll get to that in a moment. Okay. The Beinoni is somebody who serves God as a verb in the present tense. He's working on it. He's doing it. That's his job right now. But that's not the tzaddik. Let's continue reading. Page 127. The tzaddik, however, is generally called by the noun a servant of God. You see that difference? A tzaddik is not somebody who's serving God. A tzaddik is somebody who's already gotten the title. He's a servant of God. Let's continue. That's not a present tense construct, but a title, like a sage or king who has already achieved this title. So the Beinoni is referred to in the verb, in the present tense, that he is doing the work of serving God. A tzaddik is referred to by the noun, a servant of God, a title. Here too, the use of a noun implies that this tzaddik has already done the hard work and entirely completed the job of warring with the bad to the point that he has banished it and it is no longer there. His heart is empty within him, meaning he has no Yetzer Hara on the left side of his heart. So the tzaddik is referred to in the noun, a servant of God, because he doesn't have to go to battle. He's past the battle. He is now somebody who has embodied this identity. He's a servant of God. He's not doing the work. He doesn't have to show up to battle. Okay. We're still building up to our point. I want to summarize with you what we've learned so far. The identity of the Beinoni is that he's somebody who is serving God. What does it mean to serve God? It means he's putting in effort. He's fighting a battle. That's the definition of serving God. And we said a tzaddik is somebody else. A tzaddik is somebody who's even beyond that. He once was battling, but he succeeded in the battle. See, he's like a servant of God. He's beyond service. He's beyond serving as a verb. But let's look at the verse. All right, the Alter Rebbe is getting us into this whole discussion through this verse. The verse says, then you shall return to see the difference between a tzaddik and a rasha. That we know. We learned Tanya earlier. We know the difference between a tzaddik and a rasha. But then it says between one who serves God and one who does not serve him. So what does that mean? That there's somebody who's not a rasha, but does not serve God. And that's going to be the tension of this chapter. Let's read now. Part 2, the effortless Beinoni. Here's a very interesting concept. In the Beinoni, there are also 2 levels. There's the one who serves God, as we've just explored above. And then there is an inferior level Beinoni, which is the one who does not serve him. Very interesting. Let's think about this for a moment. There's somebody who's a Beinoni. A Beinoni means you don't give in to weakness at all. Not one moment of your life. Every mitzvah you do. And unbelievably, the Prophet refers to this type of Beinoni as somebody who does not serve God. Can you imagine that? You do every mitzvah, but you're not serving God? That's a very, very confusing concept. What does that mean? Let's continue reading. Yet despite being categorized as not serving God, nevertheless, he's not a Rasha. So you're not serving God because you're doing sins. No, you're beautiful. Beautiful Jew. You do every mitzvah. But yet the verse considers you as not serving God. Why not? So the Alter explains. For he has never transgressed even any small transgression in his lifetime. This is a guy, he doesn't do any sin. He fulfills all the mitzvahs that he is capable of fulfilling, including the study of Torah, with that is worth all the other mitzvahs combined. And he does not allow his mouth to stop reciting the words of the Torah. Look at this guy. He's beautiful. Doesn't do any sins. Does every mitzvah. Studies Torah. What could be wrong with this guy? Why would the verse describe him as not serving God? Here's the key paragraph. Says the Alter Rebbe. But despite absolute mastery over his thought, speech, and action, this Beinoni is classified as one who does not serve God. Why? Because he does not go to war with the Yetzer Hara at all, to struggle to win over it. He never shows up for battle. We'll find out soon why not. He is not making use of the godly light that shines upon his divine soul within his brain to empower himself to rule over the urges of the heart as described above. This is a Beinoni who is somehow able to do everything perfectly, effortlessly. This guy is cruising through life. He never has to show up and fight the battle. He's like the A student, right? Straight A's, and it's just easy. It's effortless. And the Alter says, if you're not battling, I've got news for you. You're not serving God. Okay, we have to understand this phenomenon. But let's keep on reading. How could this happen? Why doesn't he fight? Let's keep on reading. We're on page 128. Why doesn't he fight? Because his Yetzer Hara doesn't oppose him at all. This guy has a Yetzer Hara, an evil inclination, which is so benign. It never attempts to make him waste time from his Torah study and prayer. So he has no need to fight against it at all. You know, some people, their evil inclination puts up a tough fight. This guy, he's lucky. His evil inclination is just easy. Very easy on him. For example, he could be someone who's studious by nature from childhood because of the black bile that dominates his metabolism, which leads to an analytical and serious temperament. Okay, a lot of heavy words over here. Anybody ever heard about black bile? Okay, this is like a little bit ancient physiology. We won't get too much into it. There's basically different personalities. Some people love excitement. Some people love moving around a lot. Some people, their temperament, they like being a bookworm. They're not social. They're not looking for excitement. They're not looking to go on vacations. They're not looking for pleasure. They just simply want to study and learn. That's their nature. They're a little bit melancholic. They're a little bit serious. They would rather just sit down and learn. You know, the great philosophers, Aristotle, Socrates, fit this definition. I believe Socrates said this about himself. You know, the great philosophers were very wealthy people. They were able to give themselves all the pleasures in the world. They were able to live hedonistic lives. But they didn't. They totally detached themselves from the pleasures of the world, and they just simply sat and studied the whole day. It's a personality thing. It's not because they were holy people. It's a personality. Their personality is to study. So you could be a Jew, and simply your nature is that you simply don't want to do stuff. You're not in the mood of playing basketball. You just want to sit and study. You would rather sit at home in your office and study Torah a whole day and study Talmud a whole day. It's effortless. It's not because you're doing it as an act of devotion to God. It's not because you're doing it as an act of commitment to Judaism, to growth. You're doing this in cruise control. This is what I like doing anyways. So you could be a Jew who sits and studies Torah a whole day, but it's just natural. It's easy for you. It's not because you're serving God. It's not because you went to battle with your evil inclination to do what's right, even though it's not easy. No, this is what's convenient for you. Let's continue. It could also be that he doesn't have to battle with the desire for a woman. This guy doesn't have any sexual desires because he's cold and dispassionate by nature. Some people are very, very sensual, so it's part of their nature. And these people, one of their challenges is sexual desire. And some people are very unsensual by nature. They're very dispassionate. They're passionless. They're not heated people. They're very cold people. Things don't excite them. So therefore, for them, it's easy to stay away from sin. You know why? They just lack an interest in pleasure and desire. It's a nature. It's a cold personality, a cold temperament. And the same goes with other pleasures of this world. He is naturally deficient in his sense of enjoyment. So this is a guy, let's paint this picture here. This is a guy that he looks like a tzaddik. He doesn't do any sins. He studies Torah a whole day. He looks like such a serious dude. And meanwhile, you know what the Alter Rebbe says? This guy's doing it simply because this is what's convenient for him. This is his nature. He's not somebody who worked hard to get to this place. For him, this is life. This is the easy life. Sit and study a Torah a whole day. Stay away from sins. He's anyways not interested. What's wrong with this guy? You know what's wrong with this guy? What's wrong with this guy is that essentially it could be that he has no real relationship with God. He's so religious, but he has no God in his life. It's an interesting condition. Some people could be very religious and they don't have God in their life. They're not serving God. They're not actually in a relationship with God. So technically they're a Beinoni, but they're also not serving God. You could have such a thing. They don't need any motivation. And this is what the Alter Rebbe says now. Therefore, since his Yetzer Hara is so benign, he has no need for much contemplation of God's greatness to find inspiration and motivation. Usually, for a Jew to grow in his Judaism, you need to create a relationship with God. You need to create a motivation. Something needs to move you. This guy doesn't need any motivation. He doesn't ever need to invest himself to foster and create a bond with God. It's not so crucial for him to achieve a proper realization through meditation, to bring about an awe of God in his brain in order to refrain from transgressing any negative mitzvah. He doesn't need the fear of God in order to motivate him to stay away from sin. Or he doesn't need the motivation to bring about love of God in his heart, to motivate a connection with God by fulfilling the mitzvahs, the study of Torah being worth all of them. This guy doesn't need any motivation. Usually to grow in Judaism, usually to create a relationship with God, you need to create a passion. You need motivation. You need an engine. What's moving you? This guy doesn't need it. He's religious, but that's his default position. It's easy for him. He's not working on a relationship with God. All this form of motivation, love, awe, meditation, he finds largely unnecessary. He doesn't need this. Since his Yetzer Hara is so weak, and he finds it possible to be a Beinoni without a concerted effort. Rather, for him, it is quite sufficient that he has the same love that is hidden in the heart of all Jews, who are all called the lovers of his name. You know, every Jew, if you're born a Jew, you have a natural proclivity to Judaism. You have a natural soft spot for Judaism. So this guy is a bookworm. He likes studying anyways. Because he's a Jew, he studies Talmud. So he could spend the whole day studying Talmud. But let's think about it. Joel, you have a question?
Was he born like this?
Yeah. The way we're describing it now is he's born like this. He has a very, very cold temperament. He's a little bit like a geek. You know, geeks love sitting and studying the whole day. He's a geek. Because he's a Jewish geek, and he studies Talmud. If he wasn't Jewish, he'd be reading math books the whole day. But because he's Jewish, he's reading Talmud. So the Alter says, this guy is not studying Torah as an act of devotion, as an act of commitment. As a way, he didn't work on himself. He didn't earn this place. This is effortless. The only reason why he's doing this is because he happened to be born Jewish. So therefore, says the Alter Rebbe, this is the unbelievably powerful line. Therefore, this Beinoni cannot in any way be considered one who serves God. You're so Jewish. You're so religious. Look at you. You don't do a single sin. You do every mitzvah. You sit and you're studying Torah all day. Says the Alter Rebbe, you're not serving God. Why? Because the existence of this love hidden in his heart is not of his own making or a product of his labor whatsoever. It's simply an inheritance from our forefather to all Jews, as will be explained later. The Alter Rebbe says, look, you don't own your Judaism. You happen to be born a Jew. You happen to be a bookworm. You happen to be very dispassionate and cold. So you happen to be a Beinoni. Alter Rebbe says, I've got news for you. You happen to be very religious. But there's no God in your life. This is not something of your own making. You can't claim credit for your Judaism. You can't claim Judaism for your success. Unbelievable idea. And here we're starting to see how the Alter Rebbe says life is about being in a mode of service. Which means what it means to be a Beinoni, what it means to spiritually grow, is that we're fighting the battle. And sometimes the effort that we put in is more important than what we're doing. And I'll explain, we'll understand this more the more we keep on learning. Okay, now let's stop for a moment. We now just learned about a guy who is naturally a bookworm, naturally dispassionate, and therefore easily slips into the mode of being a perfect Beinoni. I don't know about you. For me, I'm not this guy. I find sometimes very difficult to study Torah. I have to push myself. I'm definitely not as dispassionate as this guy. I've definitely got a Yetzer Hara that is pushing me for weaknesses. But the Alter Rebbe says we all have a little bit of this guy also. Let's think about it this way. What are the parts of our Jewish life that are easy for us? What are the parts of our Jewish life that we became comfortable with doing? What is our comfort zone? And the Alter Rebbe says, you know what? Sometimes we get very settled and we cozy up in our comfort zone. We find the box that we're comfortable in, and that becomes our Jewish box. And we don't do more, we don't grow. And you say, yeah, I'm doing good things. I study Torah once a week for an hour. I do this mitzvah. I give a little bit of charity. And you become very, very complacent. And the Alter Rebbe says, when you start becoming too complacent, you know what you become? You start becoming somebody who is not serving God. You're allowing your natural habit to be the force of life. And that means that you're not showing up for battle. Your Judaism is not something that's happening as an act of devotion. Your Judaism turned into just simply your habit, what you like doing. And the Alter says we have to keep that in mind. That's no good. Let's read. The same classification of a Beinoni who does not serve God applies to someone who is not studious by nature, but has nevertheless accustomed himself to sit and study for hours on end until this habit has become normal for him, a second nature. For him as well, this hidden love is sufficient to maintain his level without any extra effort, until he decides he wants to study more than he is accustomed to, in which case he will have to invest effort and become one who serves God. Says the Alter Rebbe like this. Let's think for an example. Imagine you're a guy that you used to not study any Torah. And then you started putting in work to grow in your Judaism. And now you're used to studying Torah for 1 hour every single day. And then you say, oh, I've made it. Now it's part of my habit. I learn Torah once a week, once a day for an hour, whatever it is. So you used to be serving God. You used to be putting in a lot of effort. But what happened now? Now you're in cruise control. Now you're just cruising through it. The Alter Rebbe says, you've just become somebody who's not serving God. You're not breaking your nature. You know, here's another example. Imagine somebody who never gave any charity. But then he learned about charity and the value of giving charity in the Torah. He started giving 10% to charity. Unbelievable. 10% of his income he gives to charity. And at the beginning it was very difficult. Very difficult. 10% of his income he's giving away. But he's doing it as an act of service to God. It's a mitzvah. And he fights against his Yetzer Hara. And eventually, over a few years, giving 10% of his money to charity starts becoming easy. It starts becoming habit. It starts simply becoming the status quo. Says the Alter Rebbe, I want you to know, when we let that happen, we leave the zone of serving God, and now we are not serving God. Because serving God means that we're growing, and that we're showing up for battle, and that we're leaving our comfort zone. And we're not just being stagnant and complacent. This chapter is a direct affront to the religious lifestyle, to religious Jews. One of the biggest problems that religious Jews face is complacency. Now just think about it. You're born a religious Jew. So you're born keeping Shabbos. You're born keeping kosher. You're born praying 3 times a day. From the moment you turn 13, you put on tefillin every day. And there could be religious Jews that live through life for decades. And they're just cruising through it. There's no relationship. They're not in it for God. They're in it simply because this is who I am. This is my nature. This is my nurture. This is the way I was brought up. I don't know anything else. But 1 second. Why are you keeping Shabbos? Just because I've done it my whole life? Or is this an act of service for God? I'm in a relationship for God. I'm doing this for you, God. Religious Jews face a problem that they don't even realize they face. They could be religious for decades and they haven't been serving God for 1 day their whole life. Where's God in your life? Is there God in your life? The Alter Rebbe says, the goal of a Beinoni is not to be religious. You know what the goal of a Beinoni is to be? Somebody who serves God. Because how many mitzvahs you do or how perfect you look means very little once we see that the goal of life is to serve God. So here's an example. Here's a little bit of a thought experiment. Who's the better Jew? Right? Who's the better Jew? Here are two people. One person is a religious Jew. He walks the walk, talks the talk, knows a lot of Torah, does a lot of mitzvahs. Born and bred religious Orthodox Jew. Ultra-Orthodox. I hate that word. It's like a slur. All right. The media loves ultra-Orthodox. Okay. This guy is intense religious, okay? Then you have another Jew. This Jew is the opposite. Not religious at all. Totally secular. Was raised in a very secular home. But you know what this Jew is doing? This Jew recently started getting involved in Judaism, started learning Torah, started learning Tanya. And this Jew doesn't do anything. He does all the sins in the books, doesn't do any of the mitzvahs. But he decided, you know what, I want to start developing a relationship with God. So I'm going to start lighting Shabbos candles once a week. Or I'm going to start putting on tefillin once a week. Or twice a week. But you know, for this Jew, it's very difficult. They're very not used to it. They're not used to before going to work putting on tefillin. It's breaking their habit. It's breaking their routine. It's a new thing for them. It's uncomfortable. It's taking a lot of time for them to do it. But they really work on it. They grow in their Judaism as an act of connection to God. Who's the better Jew? The religious Jew who's doing everything? Or the conventional wisdom? What's conventional wisdom? Conventional wisdom is, look at this religious Jew. He's perfect. He's beautiful. And look at this other Jew. He's barely able to do one mitzvah. He's barely able to scratch out one good deed. And even when he does do that mitzvah, he's still eating non-kosher. So you know what I'm saying? How good could he be? That's conventional wisdom. Comes the Alter Rebbe and says, turn it all on its head. Who's serving God and who's not serving God? Who's entering into a relationship with God and who's not? Religious Jew does everything? Yeah, it's easy for him. That's his habit. That's a status quo. Is he serving God, though? Is he in a relationship with God? Maybe. We don't know. But also very possibly not. He keeps Shabbos because he doesn't know of any other life. He keeps kosher because he's used to doing this. This is simply his habit. This other Jew is actually serving God. He's entering a relation. He's doing hard work. He's breaking his habit. He's fighting his evil inclination. So the Alter Rebbe totally levels the playing field over here. The Alter Rebbe says, a Jew is somebody not who does a lot of mitzvahs. That's not the success of a Jew. And in fact, there could be a Jew who does a lot of mitzvahs, and he is not serving God. The goal of a Jew, the goal of the spiritual lifestyle, is that you're serving God. You entered into a relationship with God. And what that means is that you left your comfort zone and you're doing something as an act of commitment, as an act of service, as an act of worship. So the Alter Rebbe says, the Beinoni, the goal of a Beinoni, what we ask of as a Beinoni, what we have to ask of ourselves as a Beinoni, is to challenge ourselves every single day. Am I serving God or am I not serving God? Am I being complacent in my Judaism or am I ready for my next step? The moment we feel that our spiritual growth starts becoming easy, it's a blessing, but it's also a challenge. When we grow, and something used to be very difficult, putting on tefillin used to be very hard, but now after a few months, it's habit. That's great. You know what that means? You're ready for your next step. And if you don't accept the challenge to keep on growing, you're not serving God anymore. Don't rely on your habit. Don't fall back on habit. Don't stay stuck in your box. You know, we as humans, and this is true in our Jewish life, it's also true in our practical life. I once read somewhere that people could be so much more successful. And you know why they're not more successful? Because they get in their own way. Nobody wants to leave their comfort zone. So if somebody's making a good living, or somebody has a good business and he reached a point where he's happy, sometimes they say, I don't want to grow anymore. You want to know why? Because growing is difficult. And to grow means I'm leaving my comfort zone. I'm leaving my box. And people don't want to do that. Sometimes people are willing to not be as successful in order not to work harder. not to leave their comfort zone. In Judaism, it's the exact same way. We are all guilty, I think. I'm speaking for myself here. Of finding a comfort zone and saying, this is what I like doing. And that's hard. I'm not used to doing more. The Alter Rebbe is giving us a challenge here, which is an unbelievably empowering challenge. The only goal of a Jew is that you're growing. And if you grow, you're a perfect Jew. That's called serving God. That's the whole challenge here. To be a Beinoni means we're serving God. We're in that mode, which means we're leaving our comfort zone. And that's how the chapter concludes, with the value of service, the value of work. Let's read part 3, the value of service. Page 129. Now we can understand the Talmud statement that one who serves God refers to a person who reviews his studies 101 times. And one who does not serve him refers to a person who reviews his studies only 100 times. Very interesting thing. The Talmud discusses this verse that we are discussing here. That one shall see the difference. One should understand the difference between one who serves God and one who does not serve God. And the Talmud says, you want to know an example of this? One who serves God is somebody who reviews his studies 101 times. Somebody who does not serve God is one who only studies 100 times. So let's read. A single extra review would seem to be relatively insignificant. Why should this earn a student the venerable title of one who serves God? 100 times, you're not serving God. 101 times, you are serving God. What's the big difference with that one time? So the Alter explains. Because in those days, in the times of the Talmud, the common habit was to review every lesson 100 times. Everybody studied everything 100 times. So that was easy. That was natural. That was habit. The Alter says, the 101st time, that was where you're really putting in the effort. That's where it starts really counting. Let's continue. You can see that from the analogy the Talmud provides. The Talmud gives an analogy for this. A market of donkey drivers. Today we go to Hertz or Enterprise to rent a car. Back then, you went to go rent a donkey. And that hire out at a regular rate of 10 parsas, that's like 10 miles, for 1 zuz coin. If you plan on driving this donkey for 10 parsas, 1 coin. But if you need to go 11 parsa, 1 extra mile, then the rate is 2 zuz coins. Because that's beyond the regular drive. You're going off the beaten path. Even 1 mile is worth everything put together. So says the Alter Rebbe, the same with the lesson review. That review, number 101, that 1 extra time, 1 time more than the regular that he is accustomed to from his youth, is worth as much as all the other 100 times put together. That 1 extra mile, that 1 step out of your comfort zone is where Judaism lies, is where spiritual growth lies. That's where all the value is. And even more so, it's worth even more than them, with greater impact and power, since it's that 1 more time that earns you the title of one who serves God. To be a Beinoni, there's only one question we have to challenge ourselves with, which is, am I growing? Am I leaving my comfort zone? Am I stepping out of my box? Am I going off the beaten path? That's the success of a Beinoni. It's not how many mitzvahs you do, how little mitzvahs you do, how many sins you do. To be a Beinoni means that every single day you wake up in the morning, you say, what can I do today to challenge myself a little bit? And if you do that, you're the beautiful Beinoni. Take it 1 day at a time. What's my challenge today? And maybe my challenge today is going to take me a week, 2 weeks, 2 months to overcome the challenge and to start making it a habit. And once it's a habit, you know what the next question is? I can't become complacent. What's my next step now? We have to always be going above and beyond and furthering our commitment in Judaism. And only then can you be called one who serves God. And the Alter Rebbe says, because whenever you want to change your natural habit, you need to awaken your love for God. If you want to change yourself, it has to be as an act of commitment, as a relationship. I'm entering into a relationship with the divine. Natural isn't holy. Growth is holy. If you're just being a natural Jew, if you're just cruising through it, yeah, technically you're doing mitzvahs, and it's good things you're doing. But could you really say that you're in a relationship with God? As I told you, there could be religious Jews that are religious for decades and decades. They're not in a relationship with God. It's a very big problem in the religious community. They're so religious, but God is nowhere is not to be found. God is like on a back burner. It's called like busy work. There's no relationship. You know, I'll tell you, I recently heard a podcast. It's a podcast. They interviewed a guy who grew up religious, was religious for most of his life. And in his 60s, he lost his father. I think he lost his parents in 1 year. So it was a very difficult year for him. He was saying Kaddish, and he was already in a very sensitive space. And one morning, the shul that he went to say Kaddish for his father, the rabbi told him off. The rabbi was not nice. And he felt very hurt. And he was already in a vulnerable place. And he was so hurt by what the rabbi told him. I don't know, the rabbi just told him some stupid comment. He started thinking to himself, you know, why am I doing... He says, I don't even believe in any of this stuff. Why am I saying Kaddish? I don't even believe in any of this stuff. And he dropped Judaism. So, that's the whole story. That's how he lost. One small comment from a rabbi just turned him off, and all of a sudden he says, you know, I don't even care about this anyway, so why am I doing this? So when I heard this, so number one, the lesson that I took from this is how important it is as a rabbi to always be so careful, because people look at you and they don't look at you as a regular human being who has good days and bad days. People look at you as representing God. So if you don't act properly, you know what happens? People start questioning God. I'm not God. But that's the way it is. Rabbis have to be so careful. Okay, but the main point is, just think about what's happening over here. Here's a religious Jew. He's religious for 65 years of his life. And at the age of 65, he all of a sudden starts realizing, hey, you know, I don't even believe in any of this stuff. That means your whole life you're so religious, but you were never in a relationship with God. You never thought about this. You never made an effort. You never entered into the relationship. It's just by rote. It's a Judaism by rote. So the Alter Rebbe says we can never allow our Judaism to just be natural. Yeah, it's my habit. I just do it out of habit. You know, I go to shul out of habit. Yeah, I have Shabbos dinner. It's just habit. You know, I grew up doing it. I do it. No, that's not good. You got to grow. Enter a relationship with God. It's such a powerful paragraph here. Let's read it. Because whenever you want to change your natural habit, you need to awaken your love for God. It has to be an act of love. Find God. Enter a relationship with God. You need to do that. How do you awaken a love for God? You need to do that by contemplating God's greatness with your brain so that you can rule over your nature, which is in the left ventricle of your heart, that is filled with the blood of the animal soul of Kalipa, which is the source of your nature. Your nature is your animal soul. Your animal soul is the source of your nature. Never allow your life to be an animal soul life. Always be challenging yourself and infuse your life with godly soul growth, with entering a relationship with God and with your godly soul. So you need to create a love, a passion, a relationship for God. And then the Alter Rebbe concludes, alternatively, if you find it difficult to meditate and produce a love for God, you could at least awaken the love which is already hidden within your heart. Which means every Jew has warm feelings for God. Every Jew has warm feelings for Judaism. So find that love and use that to dominate over the nature within the left ventricle of the heart. For this too is also called service. Any form of motivation you could find as a Jew to fight against your Yetzer Hara and to change your nature, to go beyond your nature, that's called service. That's called serving God. To battle with your nature and Yetzer Hara by awakening in your heart the love that already hides there. So any form of battle, that's service. But the Alter Rebbe concludes, that's not the case, however, when you fight no battles at all with your animal soul. Then there's no way you can claim that love innately hiding inside you as a product of your own labor. You don't own your Judaism. Your Judaism is not your success. It's not of your doing. So that's the whole chapter. So the Alter Rebbe says, this is the message of the chapter. A Beinoni is somebody who serves God. And serving God means every Jew wakes up in the morning, and no matter how religious you are, no matter how not religious you are, no matter how many mitzvahs you do, no matter how many mitzvahs you don't do, there's only one question that every Jew has to wake up and answer, which is, what am I going to do today as an act of service for God? That I'm working towards my Judaism. And if you could look back at the end of the day and say, I've grown in my Judaism, you were a successful Beinoni. Even if you look at yourself saying, I don't do as many mitzvahs as another guy that I know. Doesn't matter. You grow, you're the full success. You're serving God. And that's chapter 15, dear friends. The goal of the Beinoni is simply to grow. And I want to go back to the stories that I started off with an hour ago. What does the Rebbe tell this grandfather? He asks for a blessing for his grandson. I want my grandson to just naturally, easily be a good Jew. The Rebbe said, no, that's no good. Judaism has to be something that we work towards, something that we own, something that we invest our heart and mind to connect with God. We serve God, work towards it. That's the goal. And when a Jew tells the Rebbe, what should I do, Rebbe? I don't want to learn. You know what the Rebbe says? That's good. There's something you find difficult? Serve God. Do it even though it's difficult. That's called a commitment. That's called serving God. The worst is a Jew who loves learning, and his learning is easy, and it's never an act of relationship. It's not his. He doesn't own it. So there's a story. There was a Jew from California. I'm going to send out the video. I'll send you the video tomorrow. There's a secular Jew from California. And he met the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he asked the Rebbe, I'm not a chassid. I don't have a black hat. I'm not one of your Chabad chassidim. I'm not one of the shluchim. I'm just a secular Jew from Los Angeles. He says, I can't be your chassid. I can't be your follower. So the Rebbe said, no. The Rebbe said, any Jew that at the end of the day can say that I grew today and I'm a new person, I'm a different person than who I was yesterday. Anybody who can say that, I am proud to consider a chassid of mine. So the Alter is totally changing our perspective over here. The goal of life is not religiosity. The goal of life is to serve God. And that's a very personal journey. So I want to challenge you, dear friends. I want all of us to think tonight before going to bed. What is the Judaism that I'm in right now, which is habitual, which is easy for me, which is natural for me, which is effortless for me? And what is something I could do to grow? Not something big, something small. What's my next step that I could say, God, I'm doing this for you. I'm a Jew and I want to grow my Judaism. This is difficult for me. It's not natural for me. It's not easy for me. I'm going to do it. That's where the magic of the Beinoni is. So if somebody says, being a Beinoni is too difficult for me, the Alter says, no, it's one step at a time. And if you do that one step and you leave your nature, you are the ultimate Beinoni. This is the work of the Beinoni.
All right, so I think this is probably one of the best, probably the best chapter, because it answers a lot of questions.
Oh, see, Joel. So I guess we have similar taste.
I liked all your lectures, but I like this one the best so far.
Oh, see, this is an unbelievable chapter. It totally reframes the way we look at what God wants of us, what to expect of ourselves, what
Okay.
our goal is. It's a very special chapter. So yeah, absolutely. The worst thing is when we see that our Judaism is just stuck in one place. It's all by rote, and
Mhm.
sometimes even that we have a Judaism from kindergarten, we have the Judaism from Hebrew school. Like
Mhm.
we're raised one way and we're just stuck that way,
Yeah, no.
and it's a very unhealthy place for a Jew because really, even though it seems like I'm doing a lot of Jewish things, you're not really in a relationship with God, and you're not really spiritually growing. And yeah, it's a stagnant Judaism. And just like everything, stagnant water is not healthy water, right? Stagnant water which is flowing, which is full of life, is always going to be clean. It's always going to be fresh. Stagnant water gets disgusting. Nothing is working out. So we want to be alive. We don't want to be stagnant. We want to be
Right.
growing and moving and in passion and a relationship. Things are happening. That's the message of this chapter.
Mhm.
It seems to me, Rabbi,
Yes, Alex.
this is a very natural principle because I applied this principle throughout my business work career. And I always looked at myself, if I don't improve every day, I kind of stay stagnant or shrink and die.
Exactly.
Because the
Exactly.
principle of business is you have to always be ahead and to make to do this different things, you have to grow, continuously grow. Otherwise, you're totally somebody is gonna run you over and you're
100%.
gone.
So that's exactly what you said. So we have to apply that business attitude to our Yiddishkeit, to our Judaism. Like there's a famous line that says, "How do you know if you're looking in the stream of water? How do you know if a fish is alive or dead?" So you only know that the fish is
Smell
alive
it.
if it's swimming against the stream, against the current. If the fish is going with the current, you don't know. Maybe it's alive, maybe it's dead. But when it's going against, there's tension. There's movement of its own. Oh, then you know it's alive. So sometimes there are Jews that are just going with the motions. They found their comfortable space in their Jewish life, and they're just going like that for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And the question becomes, is this Jew alive or not? Is there a flame burning? Or is it just a Jew who's just, flowing with the current? And it's a very scary thought. You could be a Jew they're doing a lot of Jewish things, but there's an empty shell inside. They themselves don't even know what they're doing. They don't appreciate what they're doing. There's no relationship. There's no God in their life. And that's a very vulnerable Jew. It's a very unhealthy Jew. It's a very scary place to be in. We have to be a Jew who's growing, who's challenging ourselves. What's uncomfortable for me? And the uncomfortability is where life really is. That's where life is. That's where a relationship with God is. It's difficult for me to give a little bit more tzedakah than I'm used to giving. Very good. Meet that challenge. I'm not used to praying as much. Oh, I don't like doing it. That's beautiful. Go do that. There's a certain area of Torah study that doesn't talk to you. You don't like doing it, or it's too much Torah study. Challenge yourself and say, I'm doing this for God. I want to grow in my Yiddishkeit. I'll do a mitzvah even if it's hard for me. That's the beauty. That's the Beinoni. That's the ideal work of a Beinoni. That's who the Beinoni is. And that, dear friends, we could all be that. There's nothing stopping us from waking up tomorrow and saying, I want to grow up. I'm going to do something which is difficult. I'm going to step out of my box. I'm going to take a leap of faith into the darkness and grow as a Yid, grow as a Jew. That's power. That's power. That's special. That means you're serving God. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but it's also very comforting. It's very empowering. It's very within reach. It makes the journey very personal. So, dear friends, with that, we conclude chapter 15. Very powerful chapter. And next week, God willing, we'll continue. Moving on to chapter 16.